Last video, we got our network manager in place, as you can see here. So now we just need to connect this all together, right? We got all the pieces in place. Let's connect it. So back to our appetizer list view here. Currently, we're using our mockdata.appetizers. Well, we're going to need an array of appetizers to populate from our network call, right? So let's create a state variable here. And really how this video is going to go, spoiler alert, I'm going to get everything working in the view, and then we're going to refactor into MVVM, okay? Little heads up. I like doing it this way because, again, I want to get it working in the view and then refactor rather than refactoring and wondering, like, one, is my network call messed up or is my refactor messed up? That's the trouble when you refactor too early. You never know, like, which is the error, and it makes, debugging it hard. But if you get it working in the view first and then you refactor, like your refactor broke it, not that, right? So that's why I do it this way. So anyway, state private var, call it appetizers. That is an array of appetizer. And for now, we'll just initialize an empty one. So how this is going to happen is we have an empty array to start. We're going to make our network call. Our network call is going to populate that array. And when we populate this array, because it's a state variable, that means our view is kind of watching it, and our array will have changed. So that change is going to trigger a redraw of the view. But now when it redraws the view, we actually have appetizers in our array, and that will populate. So that's the flow. We'll go over that once we get it all working as well. So one thing we haven't done yet, I don't think, is we haven't added functions to our view. That is possible. I know when I was first learning Swift UI, like it's once you see it, it's like, oh yeah, of course you could have functions. It's just a struct. But I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, duh, that makes sense. You can have functions. So anyway, let's do func. We'll say get appetizers. And here's where we're going to use our network call. So we'll do NetworkManager.shared.get appetizers. And you can see the completion handler we get. I'm going to hit return. I'm just going to call this result. You can get rid of the parentheses again. So here, remember, our result is a success case or a failure case. Success, we have our array of appetizers. Failure, we have an error. We're going to handle errors in a future video, but we'll come back to that. So we do a switch off of our result, right? Because that's the cases. And the first case is dot success. And you see we get an array of appetizers here. So we'll say let appetizers, right? We just basically give a variable name to what we get back here. Yep, switch case must be exhaustive. Cool. Let's go ahead and fix that so I don't have to type. Cool, failure case. And we're going to say let error. We're not going to use that error like right now. I forgot the colon after that. We'll just do print error dot localized description. We're just going to do that now. We're going to actually handle that later, but we're worried about the success case, right? We want to know what to do when we get our appetizers. So when we get appetizers passed back, we want to set that equal to our array up here. Remember I said our network call is going to populate this array. So cool. In our success case, we have an array of appetizers. So let's set self.appetizers equals appetizers. And we want to make sure it's the local variable here. That's what this L means, by the way. If you're not familiar with these little icons, L means local. So there you go. And you can see it's also green to let me know it's this one, and then white to let me know it's this one. And that's because they're named the same thing. And that's also why I had to use self here. Well, I could capture self up here new in Swift 5.3, so I didn't have to use it, but I would have had to use it anyway to differentiate between the appetizers on my view and then the local appetizers. So one other thing that will get you is, think about it. We're on a background thread right now with our networking. All your UI updates should be on the main thread. Well, what happens here, and this kind of threw me for a loop when I was first learning, is usually in UIKit, you could set the data on a background thread, that's fine. But Swift UI is different because setting the data is triggering a UI update. So this needs to happen on the main thread. So you want to get on the main thread. So dispatch queue.main.async, and then the code here. And then we're just going to cut and paste our code into there. So we're on the main thread now. Okay, so we have our function, right? We're going to use get appetizers to make our network call. If it's a success, set the appetizers. If it's a failure, handle the errors. We're going to do that in another video. But when do we call this, right? Because remember, in the view builders, like I can't just call a function, right? Remember we talked about how view builders were limited. Well, there's a modifier called onAppear, which again is similar to, view will appear. And there's also onDisappear, which is like view will disappear. So here in our navigation view, we want to do onAppear. And we just want the closure here, right? We just want to call get appetizers, right? So when our navigation view appears, we're going to make this network call, get appetizers. The network call is going to fire off. It's going to set our state variable equal to the appetizers we get back, which is going to trigger a view redraw, which now we don't want to use mock data.appetizers. I'm glad I did that run through because I forgot this. We can just delete this and do appetizers, right? We want this variable. So moment of truth. We've done all this setup over the past 2 videos. Let's see if it's working. So I'm going to run it on the simulator. This is legitimately the first time I'm running it, so fingers crossed. Okay, so let's debug this. I messed up somewhere. We'll do this kind of live. I thought this would work. I messed something up somewhere, right? So it printed off the error.localized description, right? That's what you see here. Operation can be completed, AP error 3. So if I go to my AP error, I can print off a better thing. Looks like unable to complete because I think these are, I don't know if they're 0 indexed. Here, tell you what, again, live debugging. This will be educational, right? So in our network manager, I'm just gonna add some breakpoints real quick just to see which one it hits. I believe it hit the unable to complete, but let's see here. Run it again. Let's see what breakpoint we hit. Okay, so we're in here, unable to complete. So we're getting the big error. So that tells me maybe something is messed up with my URL up here. Okay, so let's test something. I went back and I copied the whole URL here. Maybe I messed something up here, pasted it there. So we're gonna use here, instead of appetizer URL, we're gonna use base URL, and it's a static variable, so I gotta do NetworkManager.base URL, but that is gonna be this whole URL that I literally just copied and pasted that was working in our JSON preview, like on Safari. So this will tell me if it is in fact my URL or not. Again, we just process of elimination on debugging here. Again, I'm debugging on the fly. This is not part of the script. Man, still in completed, unable to complete. So something else is messed up here. Okay, I see it now. So I'm going to actually Command Z to undo what I did to get this back to appetizer URL and get my base URL back to just SwiftUI fundamentals / and then appetizers. And it's this right here, a simple mismanagement of unwrapping the optional. And let me walk you through this so you can see in case you run into something similar. This was just a brain fart, slip up thing, right? So when I unwrap this error, listen to, maybe you picked this up when I was typing it. If you did, kudos on you. But think about what I'm saying here, right? I'm saying if I have a value for error, great, continue on. If error is nil, then I go into my statement. Well, error being nil is a good thing, right? You know, response being nil is a bad thing. Data being nil is a bad thing. But error being nil is what you want. So instead of guard let, I do if let, get rid of the else. So now if you read if let and how that reads, you're saying, okay, if error has a value, then go into the scope, right? So if error has a value, now I want to do this completion handler. If error is nil, then we're going to skip this whole scope entirely and move on. And that's the behavior we want. So let's undo these breakpoints. I might be a little overconfident. I'm like 99.9% sure that's what it is, but you know, famous last words. So let's run this again. Things should be working fine. Again, a little bit of a live debugging there. Okay, great. It's working. Now our pictures are the same because remember, we're not downloading images yet, but you see we have Asian flank steak, blackened shrimp, buffalo chicken bites. You know, we have the correct count. We have all the names and the prices. You know, we're going to download images in a future video. So anyway, apologies for that little detour down the live debugging. That wasn't, you know, on the script, but you can see how simple little errors, you know, can trip you up. And here's my excuse, right? Call it an excuse if you want, but you know, when you're filming yourself, you're, you know, recording, you're kind of only half engaged with the actual code part because you're worried about explaining it correctly and talking and looking in the camera and all this stuff. So for me, whenever I'm recording my videos, little slip-ups like that happen a lot because again, there's a lot of other stuff going on. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. But hopefully that was helpful. You got to see me debug a little bit and you saw this is what it is most of the time, a silly little error. But anyway, let's get the simulator back up. We're working. We have this connected. We're good to go. I'm going to stop this and go back to our appetizer list view. Hit resume there. So we have our network call running, working. However, it is in our view, right? You don't want your network calls in your view, right? This is what you want in your view model, right? You want your view to be as dumb as possible. So here's the challenge for you. We're going to do this here in a second, but the challenge is, you know, we've done view models a couple times now in previous apps. So see if you can refactor the network call into the view model, right? Create the view model, set it up, move the network call to the view model, and make sure things are all connected and get it working again. That's your challenge. You have 3 seconds to pause and try it. 3, 2, 1. All right, now we're going to do it. Okay, so to create the view model in the appetizers folder, Command N for a new file, new Swift file, hit next. We're going to call this the AppetizerListView model. Hit create. Cool. We want to import Swift UI because we're going to be using observable object. And then this is a final class AppetizerListView model. There you go. And again, we want to conform to observable object, not observed object, observable object. Now let's create this in our appetizer list view. We'll do @state object. Remember, if you're initializing your view model, you want to use state object. If you're passing the view model in from another previous view because you needed data from that view, use observed object. I'm just, again, reviewing, pounding that into your head. Now we do view model, and that is going to equal a appetizer list view model. Initialize that. There we go. So that's our view model. I'm going to cut this state variable. So Command X, go to our appetizer list view model. Command V to paste that in. Now it's not state, it's published. Remember, your view model and observable objects needs to broadcast when it changes. And what we're setting up on our appetizer list view is we're setting up to listen to those broadcasts that it's changing. So in order to broadcast the change, use the property wrapper published. Okay, so now our appetizers are in the view model. Now we're getting all kinds of errors because we don't have the appetizers here. So well, first of all, let's kind of fix some spacing. We look ridiculous. And then now instead of just appetizers, we are doing view model.appetizers. Good to go here. And then here in our network call, get this whole thing out of here. So Command X, get this function out. Again, our view is as dumb as possible. Appetizer list view model, paste the function here. So now we have view model.get appetizers. Can add some spacing, let it breathe a bit. The code doesn't change, right? Because our network manager is still getting appetizers, and then we're still setting these appetizers. And again, because this is an observable object and this is published, whenever this array of appetizers changes, it's going to broadcast its change and back to our list view. Because we have a state object called viewModel, now we're listening for those changes. So the same process is still going on, just like a little in a slightly different way. And the last piece of the puzzle here is get appetizers. Like we no longer have that function here. Who has the function, right? The viewModel. So now we do view model.get appetizers. Do a Command B. Make sure we're good to go. Hit resume on the preview, even though there's nothing to show because we're relying on the network call to show our appetizers. So now let's run this, and then I'll walk through it one more time again to just like really drive the point home. Okay, cool. Asian flank steak, Philly cheesesteak. You'll notice it took a while to like load. We're going to do like loading views and spinners in a later video, step by step here. But you see our network call is working properly. Let's walk through that refactor one more time. Again, repetition is the name of the game. Apologies if you don't like my repeating itself. I feel like this really helps. So when our appetizer list view appears, it calls on appear view model get appetizers. Cool. Let's go to our view model. Get appetizers gets called. It makes the network call. When it gets that back, it switches to the main thread because we're updating appetizers, which causes a UI update, which needs to be on the main thread. So in a success case, set the appetizers that we get back equal to our published variable. This is an array of appetizers. So when this changes, it broadcasts its changes. So somebody's got to be listening. Good thing we set up somebody listening in our appetizer list view, right? That's what the state object view model is. We're listening to that now. So we got those changes. Our appetizer list view is like, cool, that changed. Let me redraw. It redraws the view, and now it uses the view model appetizers array that is no longer empty. It has our actual objects in it, populates all the cells. We're good to go. So hopefully that whole flow is starting to click with you. Hopefully this is becoming review and repetition. If not, it's okay. This stuff took me a long time to learn. It's all good. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're repeating this. That's why we're getting practice. But our network call is up and running. And in the next video, we're going to handle those errors properly like I talked about. So let's do it.